In this lesson, we're going to do a couple of things. First, we're going to create the paper that contains Mathewson's bio, and then the last thing we'll do is bring in the baseball card that is in the middle of the composition. When you complete this lesson, you will understand how to alter brush presets to create brush tools that you need, in this case, creating torn edges of paper. You will also learn how to copy a layer mask from one layer to another, and finally, we will learn how to place Illustrator documents in Photoshop. We will use a document that is 600 pixels wide by 600 pixels tall, 72 pixels per inch. The final version of it won't be that large, but it will be much easier to format since we're using text. So hit Command or Control N, type in 600 by 600 as the width and height, 72 ppi, then click Create, or if you're using an older version of Photoshop, click OK. First, we're going to fill the layer. Click Shift-Delete or Shift-Backspace, and the Fill menu will pop up, and we're going to choose 50% gray. This layer is one that we will be deleting later on, but for now it's going to come in handy. Now, let's create a new layer and fill it with white. Click the Layer Mask icon at the bottom of the Layers panel to create a layer mask. Now, we want the edges of this paper, that's the white layer, to look all kind of ripped and tattered, so let's add some rips to the paper. Select the Brush tool from the Tool panel or hit B on your keyboard. Go to the Brush Presets and click on it, and when it pops out, you want to go over to the sprocket on the right-hand side. Go all the way down and choose Wet Media Brushes. And it's going to ask you if you actually want to switch to the brush set or just append the new set to the set that's currently open. You don't need to append it, so just click OK. Now, since you created a custom brush earlier, it's going to ask you if you want to save it. If you want to, you can. I said no. Next, we will choose the one on the next to the last row, third from the right, and if you mouse over it, it will say Oil Medium to Large Tip, and it says that it's 63 pixels large, which is about the size we need. So with that brush selected, let's go to the top menu and under Window, choose Brush, and we're going to make some changes to the way this brush works. First, we will go to Shape Dynamics, and we will set the size jitter to 100. Next, under Control, we will set it from pen pressure to off. Then we will set the angle jitter to 100 as well. Now we will go to the brush tip shape and we will set the spacing to about 15%. The next thing we will do is go over to the Layers panel and click on the layer mask of the layer that is filled with white. You want to make sure that black is your foreground color. If for whatever reason white is your foreground color, just hit X and that will make black the foreground color. Now with the layer mask selected, go to one of the corners of that layer, hold the Shift key down, and that will allow you to drag the brush in a straight line down the edge of that layer. Now when you get to the bottom, with the Shift key still held down, drag it back up. Then drag it back down one more time. And you see what we've got there? It looks like a nice torn edge. Release your click and release Shift. Now do the same thing to the other three sides, and here's a good hint. Always make sure that you have clicked with the brush before hitting your Shift key, or you may wind up with something like that on your mask. We're just going to hit Command or Control Z to undo that. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to do the other three edges of your paper so that it looks all nice and tattered and torn and all of that. Now, that looks pretty good, but we want this paper to look really old. So I'm going to go up to File and Place Embedded, and we're going to choose our old friend, the Grunge 01 file. And as usual, it comes in constrained to the layer, so we're going to hold down the Shift key and drag the edges so that the layer completely covers our document. Something else that is a good idea is to move the layer around so that some of the discolored parts of the file are showing too. Now hit Enter or Return on your keyboard. Next, go down to the layer filled with white and select the layer mask. Now hold down your Option key and drag that mask onto the grunge layer, and you will have copied that mask onto that layer. And now we're getting somewhere making this paper look old and ratty. And because we're going to have to put some text in here that's readable, let's drop the opacity of the layer down to about 60%. And I think that should do nicely. In the Assets folder, there is a rich text document that's simply called Bio. Open it up, select all of the text, and copy it. Now, back in Photoshop, get your text tool from the Tools panel and draw out a text box that is just a little bit smaller than the paper layer itself. Paste the text in the box. Now, one thing about Photoshop is that it will retain some of the formatting from the last time you used text. In this case, we can see that it's centered, white, and really big, and we don't want any of that. So click in the text box and hit Command or Control A on your keyboard to select all of the text. Now, change the font to Courier Bold. Make sure it is left aligned and click in the color box and make it black. Now you want to make the font small enough to where it fits all of the text in the box. What you also want to do, though, is leave a little space at the bottom because we want to go over to the Paragraphs tab and change the space between paragraphs just to space it out a little bit so that it's not quite so hard to read. And there's just one more thing to be done. Again, we're going to go to File, Place Embedded, and we're going to choose an Illustrator file that is marked Coffee Ring. And it should come in about the size of the document. If it didn't, resize it so that it fills up the entire space of the document, remembering to hold the Shift key down to constrain it, then Enter or Return on your keyboard. Once again, select the mask from the white layer, hold down your Option key, and drag it onto the coffee ring so that it is masked too. Now, at the top of the Layers panel, under Blending Modes, choose Soft Light. All right, I like the way this looks, so I think we're about ready to place this in the composition, so save it as bio.psd. Now open up your composition. Let's place the bio. You know what to do. File, Place Embedded, choose bio.psd, click OK. Then when it comes in, get a corner and hold the Shift key down and resize it so that it's about, I would say about 350 pixels, right around there. And we're going to do the same thing now that we did to the photo. We want to make a three-dimensional shadow on it. So with the bio layer selected, hit Command-J on the Mac, Control-J on your PC, and that will make a duplicate layer of the bio. Now double-click the label on the layer, change the name of it to Bio Shadow. Now with the shadow layer still selected, use Command left bracket on your Mac or Control left bracket on your PC, and that's going to put the shadow layer behind the bio layer. Now, since this is a smart object, we're going to right-click the shadow layer and choose Rasterize Layer. Once again, for the next few minutes, I want you to turn off the bio layer. Of course, you do that by clicking the eyeball on the left-hand side of the layer. And now we're ready to turn the shadow layer into a full-blown shadow. So with the shadow layer selected, click the checkerboard at the top of the layer. Again, you remember what this does. It locks the pixels so that only the pixels that can be changed are the ones that already have content. And with the layer still selected, hit Command-Delete on your Mac or Control-Backspace on your PC to fill it with black. Now go back and click that checkerboard again so that Pixel Lock is turned back off. Next, with the shadow layer still selected, go to the top menu and choose Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And when the Gaussian Blur panel pops up, set the blur amount to 7 pixels. On the Layers panel, you want the opacity to be set to 65%. On the keyboard, hit V just to make sure the Move tool is selected, and hold down the Shift key on the keyboard. Click the down arrow once and the right arrow once. Once again, we want the shadow layer to be offset 10 pixels down and 10 pixels to the right. Now turn the bio layer back on. Again, we are going to distort the shadow layer to give it a more 3D look. So with that layer selected, click Command-T on your Mac, Control-T on your PC, and that is the Transform tool. Now right-click the shadow layer and about halfway down, choose Warp. From the right-hand side, I'm going to grab the handle that is first from the top and pull it to the left just a wee bit. Then again on the right-hand side, going to grab the handle first from the bottom, pull it to the left just a bit. Doing the same thing to the bottom now. From the bottom right, grabbing the first handle to the left and pulling it up just a little bit. Same thing, bottom left, first handle to the right, pull it up just a little bit. And your shadow is finished. Again, select both the bio and the shadow layer, holding down the Shift key, click the folder icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and this will put both of the layers in a folder. Double-click the label of the folder and change the name to Bio. Again, the next thing that we want to do is position the bio and rotate it so that it looks like it's been casually thrown down. So Use Command or Control T to put it into transform mode. Position it the way you want it, rotate it, move it, however you like it. You don't want any of the text cut off by the edge of it, but it's fine if some of the edges are outside of the composition. And hit Enter. And the last thing we're going to do is place one of his baseball cards in the composition. Again, File, Place Embedded, choose cmbaseball_card.jpg, and click OK. Now, before we hit Enter, we want to size it up just a little bit to 115%, right around there. If you look at the top, right below the menu, you can tell how much you're scaling it. Now what we want to do here is put just a little bit of a bevel on it to give it some thickness, because after all, this is a card. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of the Layers panel and click FX and choose Bevel and Emboss. Sometimes it's hard to know exactly what's going to pop up as the default. What we want here is an inner bevel, smooth, 100%, 1 pixel bevel. Okay. Now let's add a drop shadow. Since this is a card, it probably won't be as bent as a photo or a piece of paper would. So I think that a straight drop shadow will work. And I think if we just make it maybe the distance 2 pixels and the size 3 pixels, then lower the opacity down to about 65%, that should work. And the last thing we want to do is drag the layer down so that it is below both the photo and the bio. And let's hit Command T or Control T again to transform it a little bit, rotate it just a little bit, not too much, just enough to where it doesn't look quite so perfect. And I tell you what, I think we can call this composition finished. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.